Well, good people, the 217 from Lian Li is awesome. This thing is like the perfect mid-tower. It's not humongous, it's got a ton of cool features. It has 5 pre-installed fans that are tubeless with 2 massive 170mm fans at the front for that beautiful intake, a 140mm exhaust at the back, and 2 120mm reverse fans for that GPU airflow. They're seriously continuing to impress me with every single release, and please don't stop. They have all these clever interior features that elevate it from your standard mid-tower box to like, wow, they actually thought about this. Like having dual power buttons, one at the top and one at the bottom for convenience, depending on how your case is situated and where you need the access from. You can easily relocate the front fans without any tools with these plastic gap covers that close the spaces in between, giving you 2 cooling priority modes, either for the GPU or the CPU. And in my testing, you can actually clearly see the GPU is cooler in the GPU cool mode without actually sacrificing temperatures on the CPU side. Now, with this many fans included, you're not left stranded trying to figure out like how to power everything, because we have a fan hub at the top here, which is nice and slim. Everything is already nicely pre-routed, which is awesome. And you just power this whole thing with a SATA cable. Plus you have the option to plug this into the motherboard for RPM control. And we also have the 5-volt addressable RGB connector in case you are plugging any additional RGB accessories in there. The case is of course BTF compatible. It will support wider motherboards as well because of this clever rotating cable cover on the side of the motherboard that you can simply unscrew, rotate for those rubber grommets to be slightly further away. The anti-sag bracket for the GPU is very simple and clever. Lots of height mobility there with 2 horizontal positions too. The power supply has 2 positions, your standard one and 90 degrees, as long as it's under 180mm, to give you more space for storage and cooling for that GPU underneath. I love that the top fan bracket is easily removable with just 2 screws. This makes installation of 360 radiators at the top so simple, plus it opens up this entire area for a slightly more user-friendly experience. Furthermore, this bracket above the power supply can be removed. And this would let you install a third 120mm fan at the bottom here, not for airflow purposes because the power supply is right underneath there and it's blocking everything, but for visual purposes if you're trying to go for a pretty system. I think they got the wood accents right too. That's not over the top, but adds the perfect amount of elegance for a PC case, at least on the black model with that walnut wood. I think the white one doesn't look as good to me. I think if they went with a darker wood for the white model, it might have looked better. They always do packaging right with double boxing and strong foam padding on the interior with that separated accessory box right at the top. And the value for all that is absolutely insane. You're looking at $120 to $130. For a case with 5 fans and all these features, that is unheard of in today's market. They're clearly trying to get some market share, but now we have the Infinity model that spices things up with a totally new front panel design, while keeping all the same interior features and even adding more. So let's build, shall we? Now overall, I'm pretty happy with how the system turned out, but makes me realize just how much I dislike dealing with different RGB components, even though I'm using all Lian Li hardware, their AIO, 2 sets of Infinity fans, the one that comes with the AIO, and a separate set of fans that I installed at the bottom that I thought were similar, but they're not. They all have the Infinity element to kind of complement the whole Infinity on the enclosure. It's just that the visuals still feel a little bit disjointed on the interior, and you have to have a particular taste in cases in order to prefer the 217 Infinity versus the original 217. Let me show you why. My first impressions of the mirror glass panel at the front here is that I actually quite like it. It gives the 217 a little bit more flair and elegance. in this kind of like a standard mid-tower category, but there are a few things to notice. First, it looks like a speaker grill because of the perforation mesh and how the edges protrude outside. This is very reminiscent of a just traditional speaker. And obviously we have RGB fans underneath that add to the whole like disco aesthetic. Now these front caps are removable because they act as your dust filter, so you would want to eventually clean them. And I actually really like the look of the exposed fan, especially because the glass is now all the way flat with just these circular cutouts. I think that would have been a really cool design by default. And keeping the caps off doesn't really work because we have this exposed plastic frame underneath that is ugly. The fans also feature the infinity hub in the center, which looks good, but obviously with anything that's rotating at higher speed, and if it's not perfectly aligned, it's gonna look like it's wobbling, and most of these fans look like they're wobbling. As for the infinity mirror, it does exactly that. Full reflection around the perimeter of the front panel with the brightness that diminishes as you go deeper. And I think the case would have looked way better if they did something interesting with the front ventilation mesh, because this is like the most basic mesh there is, and it doesn't match the otherwise cool infinity aesthetic. And removing it just really confirms that this looks way better without the mesh. I actually really like how reflective the front piece is. That gives a little bit more dimension to the front panel. But the unfortunate thing, or maybe fortunate depending on how you like it, there is a clear yellowish hue towards that mirror glass finish, which means anything that is reflected inside this mirror is going to be slightly warmer and yellower than in real life. You can see it on the white table, you can see it in the reflections of my white walls. I definitely would have preferred a cooler tone because all the reflections seem yellow, and at first I thought it was just my floor, but no, the actual mirror inside just has a yellow hue. I do like the overall symmetry of the front panel. This looks way better versus, let's say, if the fans were slightly shifted up. But in this case, you do lose the flexibility like you had on the original 217 to move the fans up or down. The other difference between the black and white models is actually the perimeter edging on this front glass piece. So like slightly more graphite gray on the black model and more silver on the white. Color control is very easy here. We have M1 and M2 right beside the power button. So M1 controls our perimeter edge lighting, M2 controls anything else that's connected to the hub. So it's easy to kind of color match both of these to make sure that, you know, the effect syncs up. And there are some basic effects, but generally I prefer no RGB puke and just simple, clean color. Beautiful yellow, nice. There are a few main differences between the Infinity model and the original, namely the two reverse fans on the power supply shroud are not included, and all of our storage brackets are already pre-installed right underneath because we're not using this space for cooling. The rest of the interior is exactly the same as what we saw previously, except the front fans can no longer move up and down because of the front glass piece, you know, that's kind of set in place, and therefore our frame here is fully metal. It is not open like with the 217 original. I think to nobody's surprise, the temperatures on the Infinity model are worse because we don't have the two intake fans at the bottom. So the GPU is actually 5 degrees hotter with the Infinity model versus your standard 217 with the front fans set in the GPU cooling configuration to match the setup with the Infinity. Honestly, that surprised me a little bit, but I guess it makes sense. We have a way more open front panel on the standard model, plus we have those two additional intake fans for the GPU at the bottom. In reality though, are you going to feel the difference with modern hardware? Likely not. So I would say between the two models, just choose whichever one you like the looks of more, especially because the 217 Infinity is the same price as the traditional 217. You can see the fan hub is also completely different, which is kind of unfortunate because this will not accommodate anything other than Lian Li's own proprietary fan connectors. So you don't have 4-pin PWM connectors nor the standard 3-pin 5-volt ARGB connectors either. We also no longer have dual power buttons. As you can see, the side I/O doesn't have the power button anymore. The power button is only located at the top now. But the Infinity gets the advantage because now you can relocate the I/O to the top. So if this lives on the ground somewhere, on the pedestal, or underneath the table, this I/O placement is way more friendly. One of my favorite features with the 217 that I hope gets trickled down into many more brands is the whole idea of like the toolless fan, like with the front fans, for example, being able to relocate them into two configurations without touching a screwdriver or accessing screws from the other side. Like, that's genius. Or being able to install fans on top of our power supply shroud without needing to remove any panels or dig your tiny screwdriver underneath the power supply shroud. It is a brilliant design. One of my least favorite features, and I don't know why this is becoming such a big trend, is inability to lock your rear side panel. So for example, if you don't do a good job with cable management, you can't close the side panel. And sure, that is on you to make sure that no bulges happen, but sometimes bulges have to happen. I just want to close the damn panel, and I can't when the panel is toolless. And I do love the ability to simply rotate our PCIe brackets at the back on the frame level without needing additional brackets. You just need to have your own riser cable in order to go with the vertical GPU. I absolutely love what Lian Li is doing here, both in the 217 and the 217 Infinity. Even though there are some quirks that are not particularly my style, they're just trying to branch out into trying to gain extra market share, especially because of such aggressive pricing and such awesome features that are not normally found at this price point, with this sort of variety of models available too, in terms of color, in terms of wood, in terms of infinity mirror glass. So I can easily say the 217 deserves the Hardware Canucks Damn Good award. And yeah, build responsibly. I'll talk to you in the next video.